Welcome to the Human Factors and Ergonomics Hub, a series of educational podcasts that showcase the connection between human capabilities and good work design, brought to you by the Human Factors and Ergonomics Society of Australia. Hi everyone, and welcome back to the HFE Hub. I'm Sharon Todd, and today I'm chatting with Sidney Irwin. Sidney is a lecturer in positive psychology at the Appleton Institute, School of Health, Medical and Applied Sciences at CQ University. And her research has included some interesting things such as trash talk in gaming, and most recently she is working on fatigue in esports. So thank you so much for joining me today, Sidney, on the HFE podcast. I'm really interested in the work that you have been researching in the past and also your most recent work, given that you're going to talk about fatigue and jet lag, and I myself today am jet lagged. So I've had a fairly interesting start to this podcast. So let's jump in at this point and just chat briefly about something about yourself. So tell us who you are, what you do, where you're working, the kinds of research that you're working on.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Sharon. I'm Dr. Sidney Irwin. I am at Central Queensland University in our Appleton Institute, and I'm a lecturer in positive psychology. But I've done a bit of research on fatigue. However, my main area is on esports, competitive video gaming. I did my PhD rather niche. I looked at the forms and normative rules of trash talk in esports, trash talk like sledging and that, where the line is drawn between that lighthearted banter to that form of then online harassment. And now I'm sort of trying to go more down the path of fatigue research. It is the Appleton Institute's area of research as well. And now I'm trying to look at jet lag and its effect on esports performance.
So given that they're two interesting topics, which one would you like to talk about first?
Oh, please, barman's orders.
Okay, well, maybe we should start with the trash talk. So you've mentioned that it's sledging. Just tell us a little bit about what it is and what the problems with it are in gaming.
Yeah, sure. So trash talk is those verbal taunts that is seen in any form of competitive space. If you're familiar with any form of conventional sports, you'd be well aware of it as well. And in esports, there's no exception. But esports is a bit unique because esports tournaments are either online, so people are playing on other sides of either the country or the world. And so it's done through a lot of verbal communication on microphones, sort of like what we're doing now. But then there's also what we call LAN tournaments, local area network. And those are the giant in-person stadium events that people will fly and go to. And with that, then you have a bit more of the physical taunting. The players are on opposite sides of the stage, so they might just start throwing verbal gestures to each other and that. And then in esports as well, because they're playing in this virtual video game environment, they do a lot of in-game actions as well to taunt players and that, whether it be to progressively, if you're playing a first-person shooter game, you would progressively shoot at an enemy's body after they've fallen, just sort of more like, rubbing salt in the wound and that equivalent. And so there's all of these various forms, and we just wanted to know, when does it become too far? Because trash talk in the professional space, it falls under unsportsmanlike conduct. And it's such a grey area in which tournament officials and admins, they're not quite sure where the line is drawn of when it's acceptable, where it's fine, and then when they actually have to start penalising players for misconduct. So we just wanted to really find these areas and really try to make like a nice linear, like almost like a continuum of behaviour and that. And what we just really found in the end was it is very contextual. It depends on the motive, whether it was just to have a bit of lightheartedness or to really be derogatory to another person. It was the act itself. And for example, words, any form of swearing or I guess personal attacks were definitely seen more harshly compared to just making fun of someone's performance and that. So we didn't really at the end get a nice clear understanding or like a nice little rule of what we can implement. but we definitely helped show that it is just that so broad of a concept that you really can't, that it has to be a case-by-case analysis of when you want to examine player conduct.
I want to bounce back just a little bit to the definition of esports and maybe just what they're actually playing on esports. And do they get paid for these games? Obviously, I don't do this, so hence the question.
No, and in Australia, it's very, very not as known compared to, say, over in America, definitely not over in Europe in that it's more mainstream. When a Danish team won an esports tournament 2 years ago, the Prime Minister came out to congratulate them all. Like, it's very much, well known over there, not so much here. But esports, much like when you think about sports and how it branches off to, say, football or netball and all that, just these various forms, esports, there's a lot of video games. Perhaps the common ones are Counter-Strike, which is a first-person shooter game, sort of like a cat and mouse. Then there's League of Legends, which is very much more of a fantasy, real-type strategy game, and even I'm struggling to wrap my head around that one. You have Rocket League, which is, soccer, but they drive around in cars on the stadium and that. So esports just encapsulates so many video games. And then you even have niche ones which maybe aren't as known, such as Farming Simulator, which, it's a bit out there, but it's a lot of fun to look at. Are
we driving tractors in farming?
You're pretty much doing a harvest. And it's all these various niche rules, and you have to choose which type of equipment you're going to get. And it's hard to explain. But when you sit down and you watch the tournament, go ahead, and the crowd just erupts when they see certain players perform certain maneuvers, it's a sight to behold, really.
I have to ask if this kind of came out of COVID.
In COVID, there was definitely a spike, and especially when a lot of conventional players started to shift towards playing esports. I guess the common one for that was iSim racing, which is just simulated driving, where you have your steering wheel and your foot pedals, and you would just drive around the tracks. A lot of Formula One players started to jump onto the local esports tournaments for that. Just when we're all in lockdown. But then also in esports during COVID, we saw a bit of a rise of what was called the esports winter. And that's when we started to realize that esports never had any monetization towards it. No pay-per-view, going to tournaments as a spectator was very cheap. And we saw a lot of sponsors, due to financial hardship, starting to pull out, but then not coming back. And so now we're actually seeing a bit of a decline in esports, where not many tournaments are happening. A lot of organizations have to pull out, and that went on just until probably last year. And then we started to see a bit of an incline again, because now the Olympics are in talks of making an esports Olympic Games, and that's drawing more attention back into it. So it's a constant up and down when it comes to esports, and not steady, but we are seeing on the rise again.
So these players win these tournaments, and I'm assuming there's some economic benefit to their win.
Absolutely. Some tournaments have $1 million prize pools. Others, I think, can stretch more to beyond 20 million in that. We had recently what was called the Esports World Cup that was in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. And that was a whole conglomerate of various esports games, all competing for a total prize pool, I think, for $60 million. And the motto for that was life-changing money. So it's insane. I think in 2018, there was a Dota tournament, the biggest one, called the International, where the prize pool was $24 million. And one of the players in that was a young Australian lad. And when his team won, he got to pocket, I think it was almost $2 million to come home. So mum and dad would have been happy.
Absolutely. And I think I'm in the wrong job. I might need to take a look at it. So then trash talk in that setting is entirely different because, and I'm not a psychologist, you are, but my question would be, is this trash talk to disarm people?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of the main trash talk is to really gain that competitive edge over your opponent, whether it be to intimidate or more commonly just to distract them and throw them off their in-game performance. And in those online settings, when you are speaking more through microphones, it can be relatively easier. But then in this LAN setting, in stadiums and that, where you have to also resort to verbal gestures, you have to make sure that your opponent's still looking at you. And just some of the techniques these guys pull out is just, a bit odd, but it works.
So what did you find with your research?
It was still that very contextual. We were one of the first people to research trash talk in esports generally. So we had to start from a bit of a grounded approach of explaining what it is, what it looks like, what are the forms. And then as well as that, we had to find out what are the different motivations behind the use. So we implemented a lot of and tried to build our own frameworks to then be applied in future. So now that we've done this sort of like grounded level approach, we would like to now see if trash talk does indeed impair performance, because that's something that hasn't really been touched on yet.
So is there now a code of practice that's been written, or code of conduct rather, that's been written for how they should respond in these games?
No, it's just very much under the rule of unsportsmanlike conduct. And there has been cases in the past where a tournament organiser might have put in a bit too much of a, harsher penalty. There was a case a couple of years ago in which one player trash talked their own teammate. It was supposed to be just a lighthearted joke with among friends, but the tournament organiser saw that as unprofessional conduct and disqualified that team from the remaining of the event. And we saw a lot of community backlash, a lot of fans jumping on social media to say that was uncalled for, that was unfair, and that. So, it's just this much of a grey area that we just don't know how to tackle just yet.
Okay, so the audience like this kind of banter from what you're saying, and it kind of eggs them on. Is that what's happening?
Oh, absolutely. And in esports, a lot of teams and players, they'll go to social media as well to trash talk before the game. And you see those comments, those tweets and that, or on X.com now, sorry, not Twitter. You see those skyrocket with the amount of likes and reposts, and that the community does very much engage in it. Sort of like, professional wrestling and that, cutting promos. The crowd will just erupt when certain player does trash talk another.
Okay, so these gamers, are they playing as an individual, or are they, I suppose, employed by other people to play?
Depends on the esports scene, but the biggest ones they do form and are hired underneath organisations. So there's in Counter-Strike esports, for example, there's 5 players on each team, but then they also have a coach. They have a psychologist on the team. They have maybe a personal trainer and that, and they're all unemployed under one organisation. And that's another thing about trash talk, when if a player does unprofessional conduct, it's not only a bad stain on them, but the organisation they represent as well.
So what's next for you in relation to trash talk? Where are you with the research, or have you sort of stopped working in that space?
No. So I guess with trash talk, I also want to then look at the effects on performance, but then also apply it now to conventional sporting settings as well, because especially in local sporting communities, there's a lot of young kids jumping into local sports, playing for like the local basketball or football team, and they might see some conduct online and they want to apply that to themselves, and you've got to educate them of, okay, that's probably not quite acceptable just yet. So we definitely want to bring that public awareness and education as well, to try and have the game be lighthearted and fun, but also, still you're not going to necessarily cause harm to others.
Because then there's not just the moral, but there's also an ethical component to this, isn't there, which then potentially would affect other aspects of their life and other workplaces where they work. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially in conventional sports where it just trickles over. And I guess in this day and age that what's on social media, it just sticks around. So people can walk away from the professional sport, but then when they get a job elsewhere, they will be recognised, and it does affect their employment. And it's a bit unfair, but there is that, understanding now that that's the new norm. So you do have to be a bit more aware of what you're saying, so to prevent that harsh penalty being put towards you.
I was also thinking that there's then a problem with them determining where the boundary is for behaviours in other workplaces.
Yeah, and that's still something because I guess there's a lot of research done on workplace banter and how if a new person comes into employment, whether if they follow the banter or not, how much they're going to build rapport with their colleagues. So trash talk and banter, it's just everywhere in every setting, and everywhere's got their own unique rules and cultures and yeah, it's just we haven't even touched the top of the iceberg yet when it comes to this.
No, this is such interesting research, and I have to say I knew nothing about it. Thank you for opening a few doors there, and a whole lot of thoughts about workplaces and psychosocial risk factors in workplaces. And so your current research that you're looking at is on fatigue, and specifically looking at jet lag and esports. So just tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so when I was talking about before about the back on the rise again for esports, pre-COVID was perhaps what we saw at its peak in terms of viewership, engagement, sponsors, and also a lot of local area network, those LAN esports stadium tournaments. And a lot of esports, particularly there's Counter-Strike, which is my bread and butter. That is what we call an open circuit. So any form of tournament organizer can just make an open advertisement in the calendar to say, we're going to host this tournament in this country at this date. We require this many teams, go and qualify for it. And it's really good because it helps smaller teams then be able to qualify and then also compete for those large prize pool and that get some income, particularly important in Australia. But the problem is that it is international, which is great. You get to see a tournament happening over in Europe 1 month and then US the next. And then there's also been some in Australia. Just in April this year, we had IEM Melbourne, and we had teams from Russia, Denmark, Mongolia, France and all that all fly in to compete. But then those teams would then go fly off somewhere else a couple of days later to compete at another tournament elsewhere. So pre-COVID, we saw what was an oversaturation in the tournament calendar where a lot of players had to do very strenuous travel to get to these tournaments. There was one tournament that was in Europe one day, and then these two teams won. They were in the grand final. The moment they lift the trophy up, they had to drop it, run to the airport to fly over to New York to compete there. And then we saw a massive decline in their performance because they were jet lagged. And there was just always these cases popping up of jet lag pre-COVID. COVID happened, no LAN tournaments, it was all online. And now in the last 2 years, we're starting to see that growth again. But then we're also starting to hear discussions of jet lag once more. In IEM Melbourne in April this year, a lot of players, Australia is very far for a lot of players to travel. So a lot of them were very much showing signs of jet lag, going on the social medias to talk about it. And then we're also now seeing this oversaturation in the calendar again, when, again, there was one tournament in May that was in Kazakhstan. And then the day after, there was one in Dallas, United States. So no research has been done on it so far. So we're now trying to do a call for research to say, okay, is jet lag a problem in esports? And if so, how can we mitigate it?
The effects of jet lag, which I can obviously attest to today, include focus. And I think you've mentioned things such as mental acuity, rapid decision-making, and obviously this physical performance. Maybe just talk for a second about some of the effects of jet lag that you have researched.
So in esports, it's very, very unique because when we talk about the physical component, we're not talking about running out on the field and all that. It's very much when it comes to reaction time, when they're playing with their keyboard and mouse on their computers and that. And there is that cognitive decline as well of the lack of focus in the game. But little research has been done on esports specifically to look at that, because it's just an area of just new but growing area of research. But yeah, no, these things haven't really been touched on before. There has been research done in esports looking at the importance of sleep. And even without jet lag, those players that have shown little sleep at night time have had worse performances the next day. There's also a long progression of fatigue, in which if you're doing a constant couple of nights of lack of sleep, whether it be to having been nervous of the performance, be nervous of the tournament. We see again that build up of fatigue showing its toll on players. But for jet lag specifically, nothing has been done. So yeah, we kind of want to start getting the push for that.
Obviously, I'm assuming that they're travelling economy class and not business class.
Oh, actually, it varies on each tournament and the organisation these teams represent. Because with the esports winter, some esports organisations are showing to be very tight for cash right now. So some players are flying around in economy. They're in the cheaper hotels now. So that's definitely perhaps playing an effect on their well-being.
Okay, so in the research that you're doing, because they're variables, and I'm assuming that you'll be looking at that as well, won't you?
Yeah, absolutely. We're looking at that. We're looking at just how much travel they've done in the past, and also the country where they're from, because Australia, again, is that good example where Australian players are perhaps more accustomed to extensive travel compared to other players in that. And then we're also looking at age, because if you have a professional player that has more experience, but then also external factors, the wife, the kid at home, whether that is also a factor as well to think of.
That could be a reason to leave and fly to the other country.
I think in pre-COVID, one player did make a statement on social media to say he was out on the road traveling to events for, I think it was like 235 days in a year. And yeah, he had a wife at home and that he got married at the start of that year. So you can just imagine she probably wouldn't have been happy either.
Okay, so tell me about where you're at with your research at this point.
Right now, we've recently published a call for research, a short communication in the Journal of Performance Enhancement in Health. And now we're going to use that to build on and actually develop this research. One of the people in our team, Dr. Michele Listella, he's done extensive research on jet lag in conventional sporting athletes in the past. So we're trying to do just a couple of studies just to see the scope of whether jet lag does impair performance. And then also building on that, we want to look at mitigation strategies. There are some that have been brought up in conventional sporting research, such as light exposure therapy, continued hydration and that, and we want to see whether these are applicable to esports players, particularly that light exposure, because they are in an environment where they are playing with a computer screen that maybe it might not be as impactful as a result.
So mitigation, obviously hydration is one of the things that makes a whole lot of sense. I hadn't really thought about the light exposure. There's also medications that people might use while they're flying to assist them with sleep. Are you looking at the effects that those medications may have as well?
Yeah, and also caffeine consumption would be another interesting one. Caffeine consumption, particularly when it comes to energy drinks, is very much a big area of research in esports, because a lot of the big sponsors are that of Monster and Red Bull, and so those players are seen consuming a lot of their products. Now we have to see, does it also impair jet lag, or does it increase, does it decrease? Again, in conventional sports, another strategy is to limit the amount of caffeine consumption. Whether that applies to esports players, we actually don't know.
Well, this opens up a whole new world of employment, because there are levels of employment that you've been discussing. And I hadn't thought about this at all. So what are some of the biggest challenges, do you think, that you'll face in this research?
Besides funding? Yeah, funding's a big one. I guess also just trying to get a nice, clear, experimental design that it would shift the tides in conventionals in esports. There's very much a great divide between esports and also the research put onto it. There's yet to be that gap. So a lot of esports organizations, they'll go off and they'll do their own strategies and that, but not look towards esports literature. And so we're trying to see whether that we can bring that awareness to these findings and present it to these organizations to say, hey, have you considered these alternatives instead? A lot of the people that are currently employed in esports come from conventional sporting backgrounds. So sure, they look towards that literature, but maybe not so much the esports specific one, and whether that they do need to do that given the different climate that they are facing.
What's been the driver for the research? Has it been that the players have been complaining about their fatigue, or is it our perception that they're fatigued?
Definitely the complaints. We started forming this research back in 2019 when the oversaturation was at its peak. We wrote up a internal grant application and we were going to submit it early 2020, and then COVID happened. And we just had a reason for that research throughout the years, because even though land stadiums were coming back, they weren't as much compared to pre-COVID. There was still few and far in between, which gave players a lot of time to rest up between each tournament. It wasn't until last year in which people started talking about it again. A lot of players jumping on social media saying that they want to skip certain tournaments because they're so jet lagged, they're so tired all the time and that. And now this year, we're definitely seeing a massive spike of discussions again. So we definitely want to hit the ground running with this.
So tell me, these tournaments, do they actually have to play the tournament? So if there's one in one spot and one in another, and there's a travel distance, can they not regulate which ones they apply for?
So it's very tricky. In esports, there are three incentives to go into tournaments. One is naturally the prize pools. Prize pool income is significantly larger in LAN tournaments than they are online, because those are the ones that attract the most viewership and sponsors. There's also, with that, marketing exposure. So tournament organisers get to go to these events and hopefully accumulate sponsors of their own. But the biggest one, especially in the Counter-Strike scene, is the way it's structured is that there's twice a year, there's what's called the Valve Major Championships. It is the most prestigious events in the entirety of the Counter-Strike esports calendar. It's the Super Bowl. It's the finals. It's what every player and organisation wants to go towards, because not only is the prize pool bigger, but then there's also a lot of more monetization in that through the forms of sticker money and that. Very, very much like its own ecosystem. But with that, to qualify, you have to be part of what's called the Valve ranking system, or the BRS. And players accumulate points in the system by attending tournaments. So the more tournaments you go to, the more points you accumulate, the more chances that you get to qualify to go to these Valve Major Championships. And then also for the Valve Major Championships, the best teams are there. So there's also that thrill to win, to declare yourself as the best team in the world. Right now, or formerly that was Team Vitality, a French team that was just dominating a lot of these tournaments. They went to the last major, which was in Austin, Texas. And yet they won that. The next one is coming up in November, December, and that is in Budapest. So there's that very much that drive to attend these tournaments, to attend those prestigious events.
Once you've done the research, you talked about looking at mitigation strategies, and I'm wondering, beyond the light therapy and the hydration, are you thinking any human factors mitigation strategies to discuss with their employers or the organisations who set these tournaments up?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess in an ideal world, you would love to see the Counter-Strike esports calendar have specific slots in the calendar in place which tournament organisers would then have to vie for to accumulate and book that spot out in the calendar. Right now, a lot of tournament organisers, there's 4 big ones currently. There is ESL, DreamHack, PGL, and Blast. And those guys are, because they're very competitive with each other as tournament organisers, they're starting to really oversaturate between themselves of ESL will host one tournament and then PGL might start it the day after, and then hopefully that would make some players and some teams decide which one to go to. But then we're also seeing a lot of teams attending both anyway. So what we would like to see is how about in the calendar there's just certain slots in place in which those 2 organisers then have to vie for the opportunity to just book it in. And if you missed out, you missed just the competitive aspect of it. Go for one in the next month. And then hopefully with that, we might have to see some longer breaks in between these LAN tournaments, which gives players a lot more time to recover, rest, and then travel to the next one.
What do you think the chances of that are?
It does show some sort of hope because that's what they do for the Valve Major Championships. Valve is the game developer for Counter-Strike. And in esports, the game developers typically do run the whole, I won't say the whole circuit, but they do have the final say in the rules of who gets to play the game, how the esports scene is structured. So Valve actually introduced their 2 slots for the Valve Major Championships. And then these organisers actually have to throw a bid in to say, I should host it, here's why. So they have shown that they can do it with other small tournaments, but it'll be very unlikely if they do.
And then with sponsors, some of the sponsors that you've mentioned, it's highly unlikely that you would ever be able to structure in codes of conduct, such as no use of external substances, because the use of those other drinks or medications or whatever improve in some cases their mental agility, I assume.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a whole area of research that we still haven't touched the surface of either, which is doping. Doping rules have been implemented across certain esports, but that was more of the protection of younger players. A recent example, I won't say recent, it was a couple of years ago, but in North America, a lot of tournaments had to stop, had to introduce doping and drug testing because a lot of young players were starting to get addicted to Adderall, because Adderall kept them awake at nighttime so that they can train a bit longer, and eventually then they'll come to these tournaments just absolutely gut-stricken. Yeah, twitchy in that. So finally, and this was just something that organisers just implemented on their own just to help with the well-being of these young lads.
That's good to hear because, ultimately it's the behaviour is quite destructive, clearly. And, I was wondering about that. You've put a call out for participation in this research. What's your timeline on the research in fatigue?
Very interesting because you just want to get it done as soon as possible, but I guess there's no dire needs. It's not something that there's no big event coming up to show that, we need to meet this deadline, and that it's very much research that can be ongoing, sort of like in conventional sporting literature, where there's all this new research being shown on jet lag and impairment on athletes, because now they're branching out to specific scenes. And so that's even something that we can see now. I'm using Counter-Strike esports as an example because it is that open circuit structure. But whether we see something similar across other esports as well, who's to say? I did see, funny enough, with that Esports World Cup, that some players from other esports where they don't have that strenuous travel for their structure, when they all travel to Riyadh, they, for the first time, suffered for the forms of jet lag, and it hit them like a ton of bricks. And there was some little rumors that a lot of the Counter-Strike esports players were then reaching out to them and say, here's my little advice to help you in that. So a lot of players are starting to have their own ways to overcome jet lag. That could be another area of research. But timeline-wise, we can be a bit lenient, but we just have to make sure that we do it properly and we have nice grounded evidence to show whether it does impact performance or not.
or is there research that you can use from general sporting that is applicable in this area?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is what a lot of esports teams are going towards, especially for mitigation strategies. But we just don't know which are more effective than others. And also, we have a diverse demographic in esports, particularly with age. So a lot of the younger lads, they might be more susceptible to jet lag, or they might not. We just don't know. So a lot of people are putting that broad approach. I guess it's very similar to anything, whether the dietitians and all that, of what foods should players be eating prior to or leading up to events. That comes from the conventional sports research as well. But we haven't found quite that niche aspect for esports right now.
Thanks for joining us at the Human Factors and Ergonomics Hub, brought to you by the Human Factors and Ergonomics Society of Australia, where human-centred design really matters. If you like this podcast, make us your favourite in your podcast app. We look forward to chatting with you next time.